All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll start out by introducing myself. My name is Jennifer Saperka. I'm the Partnership Director for the Denver Education Attainment Network. We're also known as DEAN. So if you haven't heard of DEAN before, our role is to drive collaboration among our partners. And we partner with the school district and the colleges in Denver. And we do it in strategic ways to get us collectively closer to our goals of increased attainment and closing of equity gaps. So one of the ways that we work is that we connect information and resources so that you all who are working with high school students have those connection points to the colleges where you can connect your students to the right support so that they're more likely to be successful on their college journey. So before I introduce our speakers, wanted to point out, let me just advance my slides. Sorry, I'm trying to do like 8 things at once. Just wanted to point out at the bottom of each slide, I put this bit.ly link, and that has the PowerPoint presentation. It has, our partners have created the Auraria Campus Dreamer Student Guide. It's a bunch of resources and information for undocumented and DACA students and their parents, which I think you all would find very helpful as well. And then there's also a couple of resources. There's just a little blurb about the Dream.us scholarship. And then there's a next steps guide from MSU Denver. So we'll add more resources for you if they come up, but that's just a link for you to have and to share with your colleagues. And then we'll have about 3 sections to this presentation, and then we'll save questions for the end. You can feel free to put them in the chat. I just always find that's a little hard to follow. So feel free to pipe up when we get to the questions portion. Does anyone have any questions to start?
Jennifer, this is Raina. I'm not sure if everyone else is seeing this, but on the presentation, there's grayed out blocks on what I'm seeing. Are other people seeing that as well? Okay.
Let me try. I'm going to stop my share and we'll try again. I wonder what that is. How's that? Any better?
There's one less grayed out block, but
okay, so I'll just
keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'll just keep adjusting it until we get to. Oh, that's so interesting. I wonder.
I've seen it sometimes where if you have pieces of your Zoom on the screen, it'll.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so if I share is that any better?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you think it's like blocking out where I am?
Where it's located, yeah.
Oh, okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Yay! Thank you. All right. Then, okay. So let me just check the chat real quick. Okay, thanks, guys. So it is better now, right? Okay, perfect. So I wanted to start today just acknowledging that these are some crazy times. And, I know that undocumented students in particular have had some really, have faced a lot more challenges in recent years. So I just want to acknowledge your work. Each of you is so dedicated in your service of students and parents. And I know that they are truly grateful. But I just wanted to acknowledge you and let you know that others are grateful as well. I know that your colleagues, your administrators, people like me who work outside the system, we're truly grateful for your work. And you really are building a better future for students. So thank you for being here. So I wanted to introduce our speakers for today. Emily Orr is the budget director at CDHE. She'll be talking about the CASFA form itself. And then Andrea Kossik, she's the assistant director of scholarships at CCD. I'm sure many of you have worked with her. And then Gregor Mieder is the director of the Immigrant Services Program at MSU. And again, I'm sure many of you know him as well. So Emily, would you like to go ahead and start our presentation?
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, as Jennifer said, my name is Emily Orr. I'm the budget director at the Colorado Department of Higher Education, and I also run the state's financial aid program. So it's about $185 million in state-funded financial aid that is newly available to asset students, which, as I'm sure we all know, are a specific subset of the broader undocumented student population. Okay, so what is the CASFA? The CASFA, it stands for the Colorado Application for Student Financial Aid, and it is a universal statewide application that students who are not eligible for Title IV financial aid can use to apply for state-funded financial aid and to apply for institutional financial aid. Why did we do this? Why did we decide that we needed a statewide financial aid application? Well, in 2019, during the 2019 legislative session, the Colorado General Assembly passed House Bill 1196, which made, honestly, a pretty minor change to, I can't remember the asset statute, 237110, which allows students who are classified as asset students for tuition classification purposes to be eligible for state-funded financial aid. And when we started to kind of implement this at the institutional level, we realized that the applications that institutions had been using to determine need for the undocumented student population, because they had previously only been eligible for institutional financial aid, we realized that these applications were very different, and they were calculating need using vastly different methodologies. And because we were looking at allocating or awarding, public, taxpayer dollars in the form of state-funded financial aid, we realized that we needed to use the same methodology to determine need and award aid to asset students and other undocumented students as we were using for, sort of citizen documented students who also have access to the state-funded aid resource. And so we created the CASFA. We partnered with a company, sorry, my computer just froze, give me 1 second. We partnered with a company called Regent Education to implement this application. And typically what Regent does, they're a full service sort of financial aid software company. And so they will partner with institutions to do all of their financial aid packaging. But what the product that we are using is called Regent Access. And this product is also in use. The states of Washington, Oregon, and Texas have all passed laws similar to Colorado's House Bill 1196, which allows a certain subset of the undocumented student population to have access to state-funded financial aid. And so what this software product does is allow students to have an online, kind of interactive, smart logic user interface where they can go in and complete an application online, create an account and complete an application, very similar to how the FAFSA is normally completed online. And then what the software does is it runs a needs analysis calculation that is the same as the federal methodology for needs analysis calculations that are generated when you complete a FAFSA and you get an EFC. So if you go to, I think it's cdhe.state.gov. sorry, it's, and I can put this in the chat. It's cdhe.colorado.gov/CASFA. That will take you to a landing page where you can learn more about the CASFA, and where you can access the student portal to create an account and look at the application. When we launched the application on October 1st, it was intended to be translated into Spanish as well. We have learned that Spanish translation is somewhat lacking in clarity. So we are aware of that, and we are like actively working to fix that. Just want to put that out there. What else? So once a student completes a CASFA, part of that process is for them to select institutions that they want to have their application, their record sent to. And right now we only have the public institutions, which includes area technical colleges and local district colleges, able to be selected for students to send their ISER, their CASFA ISER files to. The private institutions, especially the nonprofit private institutions, they did have the option to sort of become a part of this CASFA network, and they chose not to. So that's where we're at. If you have a student who wants to, attend a nonprofit private or for-profit private institution, they could still potentially be eligible to receive an award of state-funded aid from that institution, but that private institution would have to carry out basically a paper FAFSA, a hand calculation, a FAFSA hand calc for that student in order to determine their need and potentially award them state-funded financial aid. So I want to really encourage, everyone on the call to access the student portal and create a test account and kind of click through the application just to get familiar with the questions that are on there and what the format is like. As I said, the Spanish translation is in the process of changing, but truly, if you're familiar with the questions on the FAFSA, which I'm guessing most of you are, then the questions on the CASFA will not be surprising. It's specifically and very intentionally designed to sort of replicate, to mirror the FAFSA, to allow for the same needs analysis calculation as is happening on the FAFSA. One last thing I want to note is that the CASFA is notably very different from the FAFSA in that we are a decentralized aid state, which means that in my role at the department, I don't actually award any aid to any student ever. I run a number of different allocation formulas, which basically give block grants out to the institutions of higher education. And then those institutions of higher education are the ones who are actually awarding aid to students and packaging aid to students. So if you have a student who's completed the CASFA and they're like, I still don't know, what my financial aid package is going to look like at MSU Denver, they also have to complete an institutional application for whatever institution or institutions they choose to attend. So once you complete a CASFA, that's really just enabling the institution of your choice to, see what your needs analysis is and to take that into consideration as they are packaging your financial aid award letter. We do have a sort of help desk set up at the Colorado Department of Higher Education, and you can reach that. It's CASFA at dhe.state.co.us. And I'll share, I have like a little FAQ page that I can share with all of you after this with the CASFA help desk email address on it. But we do not have the capacity or the ability at the department, at the state level, to make corrections or professional judgment decisions or changes to individual student applications. our role at the state level, the state level help desk, is to assist students who have forgotten their password or who have, sort of technical questions about the application. If there is a content question about the application, or if a student comes to you and says, I put my AGI as $200,000, but it's actually $20,000, they need to reach out to just one of the schools that they sent their CASFA ICER file to. And that institution, starting in about a week, is going to have the ability to make that change and to make various other, documented professional judgment decisions on sort of like the back end user interface side of the CASFA. If any of you have questions, about the CASFA, or the technical side of it, or any aspect of it, you can feel free to reach out to me or to reach out to casfa@dhe.state.co.us. And I think that's everything. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm really happy to be here.
Great, Emily. Thank you so much. All right. And like I said, we'll save questions for the end. So save your questions for Emily. And then next we have all about financial aid. So Andrea, I think you were going to kick this portion off.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrea Kossik, Yvonne Andrea Kossik, that's my full name. I'm the Assistant Director of Scholarships at CCD, and I'm one of the points of contact for undocumented students at CCD. So I'm going to be working with Gregor on this section. So Gregor, feel free to add any information that might be missing. So the first portion, I'm going to go by point by point. So the first section will be asset students who should complete the CASFA. So the CASFA is something that is an application that needs to be completed for any student that is not eligible to qualify for federal financial aid. So anybody that do not qualify for FAFSA, it should be applied for the CASFA application. This includes students that are qualifying via asset, DACA students, undocumented students, and international students. So just keep in mind that anybody that do not qualify for federal financial aid should complete the FAFSA. Now, what is important here is about the residency. When students are apply for the admissions application, it is very important for the students to follow up on their residency status. Institutions send tuition classification status, so it's very important for the students to follow up to make sure that they complete the requirement steps to complete the change of the residency. In specific at CCD, we do have a correction form that is required to fill out. In addition to that, the students that indicate that they have attended Colorado High School will send communications about how to qualify for asset. So Gregor, I think you might be able to share a screen where it has the requirements for who qualifies for asset. But in general, students that do not have lawful immigration status, but have received in the state for at least 3 years before graduating from Colorado High School or passing a high school equivalency exam, those that are DACA or undocumented students. Thank you, Gregor. Qualify for asset. Also, students that earn a Colorado High School diploma or GED after September 1st, 2013 could qualify if they were enrolled at least in 3 years at a private Colorado High School immediately preceding graduation or earning a GED, and were admitted at an institution of higher education within 12 months of graduating or earning Colorado or GED. So that's for the CASFA piece. Now, how is CASFA received and processed? So basically, we received the CASFA. The Department of Higher Ed delivers the CASFA to the schools every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As of now, there are currently no verification requirements set by the state, but this might change in the future. So one of the things to keep in mind is for students to keep an eye on their student account in case additional information is needed. One thing that I wanted to include is that even students that are not planning to attend school or attend college, maybe that's not in their plans, we highly recommend to complete an admissions application regardless, because they might change plans. And that way they will also might be considered for asset in the future. So just keep in mind to encourage the students to complete an admissions application. Gregor, feel free to add anything else to that section. Also, one thing to keep in mind with the CASFA that is very important, that before students submit the CASFA is that verified information is complete. So before you click submit, make sure that the information makes sense, and if you have any changes, make sure to update that before you click submit. One of the things that the financial aid departments will be doing is to add a tracking requirement, a CASFA tracking requirement, so the student will be able to see if a CASFA has been received by the institution. We're planning to do that by February to include that CASFA requirement. In addition to that, what other information is needed? One thing that is very important is that to ensure that the student completes the steps of enrollment. Jennifer is going to be sharing the steps of enrollment at MSU. At CCD, we do have the steps of enrollment on the website and also are included on the research guide. There is a link on the steps of enrollment. The other thing to keep in mind is that for students to be degree seeking, make sure that they declare a major. That's a requirement to qualify for financial aid. Also, it is important that they are in good standing, meaning that they meet satisfactory academic progress. So those are a couple of things to keep in mind. For verification, again, we don't have any verification requirements at this time. In addition to that, students would be required, male students between ages 18 and 25 are required to register for selective services. Students that have a social security number can do it online. For those that do not have a social security, they can complete the selective service registration form and complete it, complete it on the post office, the closest post office. So this is very important to complete this requirement, as this is a requirement to qualify for financial aid. In addition to that, for students to qualify for state aid, they are required to be qualified for in-state tuition via asset. For state aid is considered grants, work study, and scholarships. The work study is state work study funding. Those students that qualify for work study need to have an employment authorization form. One of the things that we really recommend is for the students to apply early, since awards are state grants are awarded on a first come first served basis. So complete make sure that they complete the CASFA, make sure that residency they are approved via asset to qualify for the state aid. Now, as far as the scholarships goes, it's very important that the student complete the scholarship application at the institution that they are planning to attend. In general, for financial aid, we do have a priority deadline for the schools. At CCD is April 15, MSU, I believe, is in March. So what it means is that the students that apply by the priority deadline have a better chance, better opportunity to be offered state aid and also scholarships. So make sure that they apply for the general application. It is very important to do that and complete the FAFSA as well. One thing that we also wanted to include on this section is the scholarship that we have at CCD and Metro, is the Dream US. This is a national scholarship that is the largest scholarship available for Dreamer students. CCD and Metro are the partner colleges in Colorado. There are about 70 partner colleges across the United States. The deadline to apply for the Dream US is February 25th. And this scholarship will be paying for a bachelor's degree for up to $33,000 and $16,500 for an associate's degree. This scholarship will cover tuition fees, and it will provide a stipend for books. This is a big scholarship that has made a difference in a lot of students to be able to attend school. Who qualifies for this scholarship? Students that have graduated from high school, will graduate with, from high school, have a 2.5 GPA. And also for students that have lived in the United States since November 1st, 2015. Not only, this not only qualifies for DACA students, but anybody that have lived in the country for at least since 2015, November 1st. The other thing is that the students are required to be in the country or arrive the country before the age of 16. So that's very, very important. We do have designated advisors that work with the students. And in addition to that, we have some Dreamer support days at Metro and CCD. We have quite a few for the month of January and February. Gregor is sharing some information here. At CCD, we have some support days as well, and Jennifer is sharing the flyer there. But all the information that we have about the scholarship is at the CCD website, ccd.edu/the Dream US. I invite you to take a look at the page. We have some good quotes from some of our students or how the scholarship has helped them out. And it's really, really helpful to see that and an approach from the students. And they are providing some tips on how to apply. We recommend that the students to complete the application early. The deadline is February 25th. But this is a competitive scholarship. There are two essay components. We are happy to help the students during the Dream US support days. But if for some reason students are unable to attend during these particular days, they can definitely contact us so we can help them out on a one-on-one basis. In addition to students that are high school or have graduated from high school, this scholarship is also available for community college graduates. Those students that will complete an associate's degree at a community college, they will be required to have a 3.0 GPA. So with that, we have the support dates as I mentioned. Is there anything else you want to add on this section, Gregor, about the Dream US?
No, this is perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. One reminder, we have almost 200 students at MSU Denver, DACA and undocumented students who are fully funded because of the Dream.US scholarship. So just to give you sort of an idea of the scope of the program, I think, Andrea, at CCD, you also have really, really large numbers. It is unfortunate that there's only 2 partner schools in the state of Colorado. In many ways, that's because Dream.US is pretty selective and they really want to work directly with colleges and community colleges that have really well built out support for that specific student population. But I'll put my email in the chat function. So certainly if you have students that need support with the application or you would like a flyer for the MSU Denver specific application support days, you can always reach out to me.
Thanks, Gregor. Yeah, we highly recommend that you share this information with your students. Definitely this scholarship makes a difference on our students to be able to attend school, and they have all the, in addition to have the financial support, they are connected with advisors, with scholar advisors. So they receive a lot of support for sure while they are attending CCD or Metro. And a lot of the students that receive the scholarship at Metro have an easier transition to MSU since they have been getting all the support, and we connect the student once they are ready to transfer to MSU. Besides that, what awards will look like for the state aid, again, students will be required to qualify for asset. State aid, there will be, students will qualify for state grants, for state work study, and also for the scholarships. So again, important that the students apply early. Also, they will be required to be in good standing. Work study is something that is a good opportunity for our students that have authorized student employment. We do have quite a few students that have been working in the financial aid office, and it's really helpful to have the students inside and also to help other undocumented students, and a good opportunity for their resume. As far as the academic year 2020-21, we do have the DACA fund at MSU, and at CCD is the income information form. We have the links on the resource guide. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. And I know you'll be chiming in on this next section as well. So let me just advance our slides. There we go. Gregor, do you want to let everybody know what type of support students can find on campus?
Yeah. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. I'm just going to go over some important reminders for student support that exists at MSU Denver, as well as on campuses such as CCD. We work very closely with CCD because not only do we share a campus, but in many ways we really share students. A lot of students, including the Dream.us students, that start at CCD then end up coming to MSU Denver. I think I remember seeing numbers that something like over 40% of CCD's transfer students come to Metro. One of the first tips that are sort of more general tips that we think is really important for staff and teachers that are working with DACA and undocumented students is oftentimes we hear from counselors that they're not quite sure how to offer, or rather how to figure out rather if the student that they're working with, what their immigration status is. And understandably, it's not really a good practice to directly ask, about immigration status. That can seem pretty intimidating, having to essentially out your immigration status to somebody you may not know a lot about, you may not really have been working with. So what we would always suggest is, students and parents are really good at self-selecting the resources and the kinds of support that they need. So what we do at the Immigrant Services Program at MSU Denver, we never really actually have a direct conversation with students about their immigration status, but rather what we do is we offer resources such as FAFSA, and always make sure that we side by side say, but for students who can't complete the FAFSA, the CASFA is a really fantastic alternative. When we talk about, for example, the legal services, we bring, for example, immigration attorneys onto campus every 2 weeks. Just yesterday, we had a big DACA application support day where we had around 30 students and community members tune in to both hear from the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition about the new DACA application processes and forms that are needed. That's pretty complicated. And whenever we have those resources, we essentially just say, hey, if you or somebody that you know could benefit from that. And then we offer those kinds of resources. And then a lot of times students will speak up and will say, oh yeah, this is relevant for me. I do have DACA status, or I do not have work authorizations. I do not have a social. So a lot of times I think offering supports that especially support structures that are specifically available for DACA and undocumented students will kind of lead into a conversation where students themselves or parents or family members might actually speak up and say, oh yeah, this is actually really relevant for me. So this is just an important reminder sort of around language and student interaction. Some of the other best practices that certainly Andrea and I would really want to remind the group about is start to build on your school or your campus, start to really build visible support for DACA and undocumented students. We know, for example, from college students that even just having a sign in your office that says we work with and support undocumented students can go a really long way for them to feel heard, to feel seen, to feel visibly supported, and may really change how they approach a counseling session, or how they may approach sort of the meeting that they're having with you. I would also say, you know, it can be very helpful to be familiar with relevant community organizations that are working with the immigrant and the undocumented community in the state of Colorado. Some of the groups that we work very closely with is, as I mentioned before, Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. They actually come to campus and they provide, for example, workshops for students that don't have work authorization, but that still want to know about how they can use their degree to, for example, become independent contractors and work on a contract basis using an I-10. That's a pretty complicated topic, and although we could to some degree speak to that with students, we want to make sure that the experts in the community have an avenue to bring that information to campus. CERC also does really wonderful Know Your Rights workshops where they review how somebody should be interacting with law enforcement, how somebody should be interacting with ICE, should that come up, and just reviews rights and responsibilities in those interactions. Another really great organization that we work with closely is the Denver Children's Advocacy Center. And although both by their name and their mission, they really mostly work around, for example, children facing trauma and facing really difficult situations in the home environment. They also provide bilingual family therapy, individual counseling sessions to the community, oftentimes either free of charge or grant funded, so that again they don't have to charge the community member. If you do have a situation that's coming up with a student and you're kind of at a loss, what type of community organization could, for example, help with unemployment assistance when an individual is essentially not eligible for unemployment insurance in the state of Colorado, or is not eligible for federal types of assistance? You can always reach out to me. If I don't have the answer, I can certainly refer you to places with that list a really wide variety of resources related to healthcare, again, mental health, financial assistance, and so on. So just to sum all of that up, you know, get to know the community service providers. That can be really helpful. I would also say, you know, you're hearing from Andrea and myself. You have our contact information. You may already have it. But I would say, you know, for those schools that your students are looking at, be that CU Denver, be that CSU, be that Front Range or Red Rocks, definitely have a direct staff contact there. If you're totally at loss who to contact, I would say reach out to me and Andrea. We may or may not have somebody at that specific school. CU Denver, for example, has a really great undocumented student services program. They would be a fantastic place to refer students to as they're thinking about CU Denver. Couple other, Andrea, do you have anything to add on your end as we're talking about sort of best practices as a student support?
No, Gregor, I think that you are covering everything. Definitely reiterate that having a point contact to help the student to navigate. Sometimes the students don't even know what to ask. So we can definitely help the student. I really like when I get an email from a student or from a counselor, because number one, I get to know the student, and then I can see what is missing since I have access to different screens, and I can communicate and connect the student if they need assistance with residency, or they need to register, or there is something going on. Again, students sometimes don't even know what is missing, and we can definitely help them to navigate.
Another resource I wanted to mention, that's something that we only started this semester at Metro, this semester being the fall semester. As you probably know, colleges like CCD and Metro, we of course always come out to, high school fairs or in general, sort of recruitment events where staff shows up and can answer questions about, the application, the different career programs that are offered and so on. But we've certainly noticed over the years that, we don't connect with students and with parents nearly as well as the students that are already in college and that are sharing that identity, especially around immigration status. So what we started doing in the fall semester, and it's been really quite popular, is to reach out to some of the high schools that we've been working with pretty closely, both in the Denver area, but also statewide. And we essentially found a way to compensate fairly modestly, but to some degree still compensate undocumented students who are giving presentations to at Colorado statewide high schools remotely. That's sort of been one of the silver linings, right, of the remote environment, is that it's much easier for us to talk to high school students on the Western Slope, for example, or in the Pueblo area. And we essentially help undocumented and DACA status college students at Metro to develop presentations that they bring to the high schools. And in those presentations, they certainly talk about some of the things like how to prepare for college. What are the important steps to think about when preparing for college? Also, what are the important steps to think about once you've been accepted? What are financial aid options? But they also kind of present their own story when it comes to higher education. How did they think about college when they were in 7th, 8th, 9th grade? What were the things that discouraged them or kept them from really seeing themselves as college students? And what were the things that started to sort of change their idea about seeing themselves on a college campus? What were the resources and the sources of strength for them? And we've had really, really positive feedback from students. We actually would love to build out those visits. We've got some flyers, so again, you can reach out to me and I'll make sure to put my email address in the chat function again. If you or some staff at a high school is interested in that, we're more than happy to set up one of those presentations. In the past, it's usually in 2 or 3 students, sometimes 4, that either in English or in English and Spanish, essentially, again, present information that's really important that needs to get out to parents and high school students, sometimes even middle students. We actually had one of those presentations by undocumented college students to 3rd, and they had a really positive response. And we know that a lot of times when we talk to students and parents, when the students are, set to graduate, to a degree that's sometimes even too late, right? We want to shift how students think about college early on. We want them to see themselves as college students, and we don't want them to just think of colleges as being supportive environments, but we want them to think of colleges as learning environments that really need them to create the diverse learning environments that we know make for a good college experience. So again, if that's something that you think could be helpful, we can talk more. We tailor those presentations in advance through meetings with you or with the high school staff to make sure that it really fits the topics that are important. A couple of other important reminders that we think is really important for you to hand on to students thinking about college. Remind them once they're accepted at a college to please start checking their email. We oftentimes hear that, students will start in the fall and they're like, oh, I didn't know I had to, fix my in-state tuition status. That's actually a really big thing, certainly at MSU, that can take quite a bit of documentation and quite a number of steps and back and forth. And the earlier that's done, the better. Of course, applying for financial aid, as Andrea said, that's something that needs to happen ideally for Metro by or before March 1st in order to be considered for the most institutional financial aid at Metro to then start in the fall. So that's super duper early. And we oftentimes the best way we have to contact students, unless they're directly referred to us, is really through their student email. So that's another really, really important reminder. And then also, you know, to think about if you're working at a school or institutional or educational institution, and you're thinking about, well, what can we do to become more supportive of immigrant, refugee, undocumented background students, is to really start to elevate their voices. And we know at Metro there are students who really embrace and are very public and very proud of their immigrant identity. And then there are those who are not. But we found early on that students really want to tell us what it is that they believe the immigrant and undocumented student population needs on campus. So bringing them in, you know, even in ways where we previously hadn't thought about it, such as hiring committees, budget, you know, where meetings and committees where budgets are discussed, and to get their perspective, not just around, oh, what kinds of workshops do you need? What kinds of legal support do you need? But even items around what is the institution doing in terms of representing, for example, immigrants in their faculty and staff ranks is really important. Andrea, anything to add so far on your end? I do want to make sure that we kind of leave a little bit of time for questions.
No, we're good.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and move on to questions. I know there was a couple in the chat having to do with, you know, now that everyone's supporting students remotely, where are some best practices, which I think you kind of addressed, but also in, you know, sort of letting parents know that the CASFA form is safe.
Sorry, yes, I can take this one. We are working on some language in conjunction with the Attorney General's office that will sort of accompany the CASFA. It'll be available on that Colorado Department of Higher Education CASFA landing page that basically says, you know, we are collecting this information for the exclusive purpose of sharing it with the institution that you tell us you want it to be shared with. We're going to implement, we don't have a great sense yet, like the volume of applications that we're kind of going to be receiving on a regular basis, because this is the first year and it's still relatively new, but we are also going to be implementing a document retention policy, so that if, you know, the sky kind of falls in and we are subpoenaed, we wouldn't have much to share. We wouldn't really have those records to share. What else can I say about this? The Colorado Department of Higher Education is the sole owner of this data. So we are working with Regent, with this software contractor, but they have exactly zero ownership over this data. It's really just sort of the like back end calculation that they're helping us to perform to create these ISER formatted files. So so that's not really a risk. Yeah, I mean, we're certainly aware, you know, that privacy is really important to this population, and discretion is really important. And we have, you know, various privacy policies in place according to statute at the department. We would never ever share any student's personally identifiable information with any party ever, especially not for this, you know, very vulnerable population of student. So as I said, we are working on some sort of official language that can go out onto the website, but this is something that we are very aware of, and we're trying to build in as much as possible into our processes as we work with the institutions, and as we, you know, figure out what exactly we're going to hold on to for the long term, which is very little.
Right. Awesome. How about additional questions?
Hi, you may have answered this earlier, but I know you mentioned that you will have like a tracker for the students in February. On that tracker, will it be able to show the students what their like EFC is or the comparable number that CASFA calculates?
Let me think. There is a way, once a student completes the CASFA, there is a way for them to access a PDF version of the application and kind of scroll. It's a large document because it's a long application, but there is a way for them to scroll all the way down to the bottom and to see what their EFC is. I'm not involved in the tracker process that Andrea mentioned. I don't know whether an EFC will be involved there, but there is a way for a student to access what their EFC is. Now, if they need to make a change to the application, or if they're working with a financial aid counselor at an institution of higher education, that number is subject to change, and that won't necessarily update as they are working with their institutional financial aid counselor. So that's something to bear in mind. But there is a way for a student to kind of, I think it's immediate. I mean, I think like once you hit submit on the application, it kind of takes you to like an overview of the completed application, and you just sort of scroll down to the very bottom, and you can see that EFC.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I have a question. I supported a student who was going to apply for Ascent as we completed the CASFA. Do they need to do anything else? And they're considering CCD and Metro as part of the Ascent program.
I'm not super familiar with the Ascent program. I believe it's sort of like a dual enrollment type program. Is that correct? Yeah, okay, I'm seeing nods. No, I mean, no, as long as they are selecting CCD and Metro on the CASFA and asking to have their completed CASFA sent to those institutions, and there is a corresponding Ascent application being sent to those two institutions, no, I think it would function the same way a normal institutional application would work in conjunction with the CASFA.
I see Gwen on here. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think Emily covered it. Or I mean, I think that Emily's on the right track for, I mean, obviously. Wow, Emily. Tons of knowledge in that brain.
Does that answer your question, Melissa?
Yeah, and I recognize that it's like a 5th year program and there's like another route that things are tracked. I think just being new, all of this being new, I was wondering if there was anything else we needed to do with that student in order to like check that box, because the Ascent application, it asks if you've completed the CASFA or if you plan to complete it. It doesn't say like you must complete it. But again, just following up because everything's feels a little new right now.
There might be, different aid sources available for an Ascent student rather than, a student who's not in a 5th year program like that. But that would all be determined at the institutional level, and having the student, complete the CASFA is definitely going to set them up for the maximum level of success, in getting a nice big aid award letter. So.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, we are bumping up against our time. Like I said, that link, which I will throw in the chat as well, and I'll follow up with an email to all the attendees, has a link to our PowerPoint presentation, which has contact information for our speakers. I was hoping that you all could fill out, just, answer these 2 questions that you should see on your board just so we can get some feedback. And then, you know, hopefully we'll be presenting information sessions like this again. So you all are on our email list. I promise I won't spam you. But, you know, if there's any additional opportunities to, you know, connect you guys with resources, specifically in the area of supporting undocumented students and parents, I will make sure to pass along that information. Does anyone have any final thoughts?
Yes, I do. Hi, everybody. Julia Montijo from Emily Griffith Technical College. So under Ascent, you wouldn't qualify to be an asset student. And my understanding that in order to be able to qualify for CASFA, you have to be an asset student. Like you had to be able to meet that requirement. So none of the concurrent enrollment or fifth year will qualify for CASFA. So I just don't see the point of having that question in an Ascent application when they wouldn't even qualify.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the CASFA is intended for any student who is not eligible for Title IV financial aid. That could be a resident undocumented student, a resident for tuition classification purposes, a non-resident for tuition classification purposes, or it could also be an asset student who would be classified as in-state for tuition classification purposes. I think it would kind of be up to your internal tuition classification officer and staff to figure out whether or not the Ascent program or a concurrent enrollment program would allow a student who would qualify for asset to meet that process of applying to an institution of higher education, which is present in 23-7. But it's really important for everyone here to understand that you do not have to be an asset student in order to complete the CASFA. And it would be it's ideal for all undocumented students to complete the CASFA because that is going to make their options broader in terms of the types of institutional aid that they may potentially qualify for. If the student in question is, you know, applying for an Ascent program, they're, you know, and they're not an asset student, then, sorry, I shouldn't qualify this for an Ascent program. If there is any student who is applying who does not meet the qualifications for asset, what that means is they are not going to have access to the state-funded financial aid sort of pot of money, but they can still access this other, actually much larger pot when we look at a statewide perspective of institutional aid. So I think there's, I want to say it's like $600 million or something statewide that institutions of higher education sort of set aside and say this is institutional aid. It's only about $200 million of state-funded financial aid statewide. So it's still really, really, really important for undocumented students to complete the CASFA regardless of their asset status, because they may still qualify for need-based institutional aid as a result of completing the CASFA.
One thing that I would like to add to answer Julia's question, you are right, Julia. One thing that I have seen is that students are planning to enroll in the Ascent program, but what if they are not accepted at the end of the day? So just to have that CASFA application is really important. That way they can be considered for asset.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Julia. Thank you, everyone else. So I will follow up with a link to the recording of this presentation as well. And I hope you will share that with your colleagues. And then again, if you have any ideas for how, you know, we can do another session to get you some additional information, please feel free to share your ideas with either me and or the speakers. But thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our speakers. All right, I hope you have a great day. Bye, everybody.
Bye.